before airplanes crossed oceans, before automobiles filled highways, before interstate roads stitched together the nation, there was the railroad, a machine of iron, steam, and ambition. A technology so transformative that it altered the geography of a continent. A force powerful enough to compress time, conquer distance, create fortunes, destroy industries, build cities, and redefine what it meant to be American. Today, it is easy to take movement for granted. A journey that once required months can be completed in hours. Goods that once traveled at the speed of a horse now move across continents with astonishing efficiency. But for most of human history, distance was one of civilization's greatest obstacles. Mountains separated people, rivers isolated communities, vast wilderness limited opportunity, geography controlled destiny. Then came the railroad, an invention that did more than move people and freight. It united a nation. This is the story of the Iron Road that transformed America. A story of visionaries and laborers, of triumph and tragedy, of engineering and empire, of ambition on a scale rarely seen in human history. This is the story of the railroad and the nation it helped create. Act 1. A nation divided by distance. In the early 19th century, the United States was a country struggling against its own size. The nation was expanding westward. Settlers pushed into new territories. Farmers cultivated distant lands. Merchants searched for larger markets. Yet, transportation remained painfully slow. Most travel relied upon horses, wagons, rivers, and canals. Roads were often little more than muddy tracks. Weather could transform routes into impassable obstacles. A journey of several hundred miles could consume weeks. Crossing the continent was an undertaking so difficult that many never attempted it. For countless Americans, the world remained remarkably small. Opportunities were limited by how far a person could physically travel. A farmer's market was often confined to nearby towns. News traveled slowly. Communication lagged behind events. The nation existed politically as one country, but physically it often felt like many. The challenge facing America was not simply expansion, it was connection. How could a growing nation remain united when its people were separated by such enormous distances? The answer would arrive on rails. Act 2. The Age of Steam. The railroad did not emerge fully formed. Its origins lay in centuries of experimentation. Wooden tracks, horse-drawn wagons, primitive industrial systems. But the true breakthrough came with steam power. For the first time, machines could generate immense amounts of energy independent of animal labor. The implications were revolutionary. Steam engines transformed factories, powered ships, and eventually found their way onto rails. The earliest railroads in America were modest, short lines connecting mines, ports, and local communities. Few could imagine how rapidly the technology would evolve. Yet even those first railroads revealed something extraordinary. They were faster, more reliable, and more efficient than existing alternatives. The age of the railroad had begun. Across the nation, tracks started appearing. Investors poured money into railroad companies. Engineers surveyed landscapes previously considered impassable. Communities competed fiercely for rail connections, because even then, people understood something important. Railroads did not merely serve growth, they created it. A town connected to the railroad gained access to markets, goods, and opportunities. A town bypassed by the railroad often faced decline. The stakes were enormous, and the race was on. Act 3. The iron web spreads. As railroad construction accelerated, America entered one of the greatest infrastructure booms in its history. Tracks spread across forests, across plains, across rivers, across mountains. Thousands of workers labored under brutal conditions. Trees were cleared, bridges were built, tunnels were carved through solid rock, entire landscapes were transformed. The scale of the undertaking was staggering. Railroads demanded not only tracks, but stations, maintenance facilities, telegraph lines, water towers, and supply networks. Every mile required planning, engineering, labor, and enormous financial risk. Yet investors continued pouring resources into expansion because the rewards could be immense. Railroads generated wealth, unlike anything America had previously seen. Industrialists amassed fortunes. Corporations grew to unprecedented sizes. Financial markets became increasingly tied to railroad success. The railroad was becoming more than transportation. It was becoming the backbone of the American economy. For the first time, goods could move across vast distances quickly and predictably. Farmers gained access to national markets. Factories received raw materials more efficiently. Businesses expanded beyond local boundaries. The American economy became increasingly interconnected, and as the tracks multiplied, so did the nation's ambitions. Act 4. The dream of a continent. By the mid-19th century, a bold idea captured the American imagination. A railroad stretching from coast to coast. A transportation link connecting the Atlantic and Pacific. A steel bridge uniting East and West. The concept seemed almost impossible. The distances were immense. The terrain was unforgiving. The costs were staggering. Yet supporters believed the rewards would be even greater. A transcontinental railroad promised economic growth, national security, territorial integration, and unprecedented opportunities for expansion. The dream quickly became a national priority. Political leaders debated routes. Investors pursued financing. Surveyors ventured into unknown territories. Engineers developed ambitious plans. What followed would become one of the most extraordinary construction projects in human history. Act 5. Building the Transcontinental Railroad. The challenge was immense. Thousands of miles of track needed to be laid across some of the most difficult terrain in North America. Towering mountains, scorching deserts, remote wilderness, hostile weather. The work demanded extraordinary determination. Thousands of laborers took part in the effort. Among them were immigrants whose contributions would shape the nation's future. Chinese workers faced dangerous conditions while constructing routes through the Sierra Nevada. Irish immigrants labored across vast stretches of the continent. Many endured extreme weather, explosions, avalanches, accidents, and exhausting physical demands. Their sacrifices helped accomplish what many believed impossible. Day after day, mile after mile, the railroad advanced. Steel rails pushed deeper into the continent. East moved west. West moved east. The gap slowly narrowed. Then came the historic moment. Promontory Summit, Utah Territory. A ceremonial golden spike was driven into the final section of track. The nation celebrated. For the first time, the United States was connected by rail from coast to coast. A journey that once required months could now be completed in days. Distance itself had been conquered. Act 6. How the Railroad Rebuilt America. The impact was immediate and profound. The railroad transformed nearly every aspect of American life. Settlers moved westward in unprecedented numbers. Agricultural production expanded dramatically. Mining operations flourished. Manufacturing accelerated. Trade increased. Entire regions experienced explosive growth. The railroad became the engine of national development. Towns emerged wherever tracks appeared. Some grew into major cities. Others vanished when routes shifted elsewhere. The railroad determined winners and losers, growth and decline, prosperity and isolation. Its influence reached into every corner of the nation. The railroad also transformed time itself. Before standardized rail schedules, communities often kept local time. Each town operated according to the position of the sun. As rail networks expanded, this system became increasingly impractical. Trains required coordination, consistency, precision. The solution was revolutionary. Standardized time zones. The railroad literally changed how Americans measured time. Act 7. The Titans of the Railroad Age. The railroad created a new class of industrial giants, men whose fortunes rivaled those of kings. Entrepreneurs who built vast transportation empires. Their influence extended into politics, finance, industry, and public life. Some were celebrated as visionaries. Others criticized as ruthless monopolists. The debates surrounding their power helped shape modern discussions about corporate influence. Railroad companies became among the largest organizations in the world, managing thousands of employees, millions of dollars in assets, and operations stretching across entire regions. Modern corporate management owes much to innovations pioneered by railroads. The railroad was not simply changing transportation, it was helping invent modern business itself. Act 8. The Dark Side of Progress. Yet progress often comes with consequences. The railroad's expansion reshaped the continent in ways both positive and destructive. Indigenous communities faced enormous disruption. Traditional lands were divided by tracks. Migration patterns changed. Economic systems were altered. Conflicts intensified. The railroad accelerated westward settlement, but that expansion often came at a significant human cost. Environmental impacts also emerged. Forests were harvested. Landscapes transformed. Wildlife populations affected. The railroad opened opportunities. Yet it also contributed to profound changes that continue to shape discussions today. History rarely offers simple stories. The railroad's legacy is no exception. Act 9. The Golden Age of Rail. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, railroads dominated American transportation. Passenger trains became symbols of luxury and prestige. Grand stations rose in major cities. Elegant sleeping cars carried travelers across the continent. Rail travel represented speed, comfort, and sophistication. Meanwhile, freight trains moved enormous quantities of goods: coal, steel, grain, timber, livestock. Manufactured products. The railroad enabled industrial America to function at a scale previously unimaginable. The nation pulsed with the movement of trains. Whistles echoed across valleys. Stations bustled with activity. Schedules governed daily life. For millions of Americans, the railroad was the rhythm of modernity itself. Act 10. The challenge of a new century. Yet no technology remains dominant forever. New competitors emerged. Automobiles offered flexibility. Trucks expanded freight options. Airplanes introduced unprecedented speed. Gradually, railroads lost their monopoly over transportation. Passenger numbers declined. Some routes disappeared. Historic stations closed. The railroad age appeared to be fading. But appearances can be deceptive. Even as public attention shifted elsewhere, railroads remained essential. Freight transportation continued evolving. Efficiency improved. Technology advanced. Railroads adapted. The industry survived. And in many ways, it remained as important as ever. Act 11. The railroad today. Modern trains may look very different from their steam-powered ancestors, yet their importance remains extraordinary. Freight railroads move vast quantities of goods across North America. Containers, automobiles, agricultural products, energy resources, consumer goods. Every day, trains transport the materials that sustain modern life. They remain among the most efficient forms of land transportation ever developed. At the same time, interest in passenger rail has experienced renewed growth. Concerns about congestion, environmental sustainability, and urban development have sparked new conversations about rail's future. High-speed rail projects capture public imagination. Advanced technologies continue reshaping the industry. The railroad story is still being written. Final act. The iron road that united America. The railroad did more than move people. It moved history. It connected oceans, linked communities, expanded opportunities, created industries, built cities, transformed economies, and helped forge a continent-spanning nation. Before the railroad, America was vast and fragmented. After the railroad, it became more connected than ever before. The iron rails crossing mountains and plains did more than transport freight and passengers. They carried ideas, dreams, ambitions, and the promise of a larger future. Few inventions have altered a nation so profoundly. Few technologies have left such a lasting mark upon the landscape. The railroad changed how Americans traveled, worked, communicated, measured time, built businesses, and understood distance itself. It transformed geography from an obstacle into an opportunity. And in doing so, it helped create the modern United States. The whistle of the locomotive may no longer dominate the American soundscape, but its legacy remains everywhere. In the cities that grew beside the tracks, in the industries it helped build, in the markets it connected, and in the nation it helped unite. Because the railroad was never merely a transportation system. It was an instrument of transformation, an engine of possibility, the iron road that united America and changed the course of history forever.